can string players work effectively no matter what type of chair they have to sit on while they're playing? This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. My name is Jess. I'm a certified Alexander Technique teacher working at a university music school. This is the University of Denver's Lamont School of Music. And I work with all sorts of different musicians. So this is a part of a series working with a different view on each different instrument type and a lot of digging into what are challenges that come up. Before I dig into the string section, I want to talk about chairs. So in this building here, there are a few different chairs that our players need to be able to sit on. So the one I'm on now obviously is a piano bench. This is the most adjustable. This is the type of piano bench that has the lever on the side that lets it go up and down. When I have cello players in here, this is usually the one they go for because it's very adjustable, and cello in particular, you need all the adjustability you can get. The other two chairs that I've got here are the ones that are used for large ensemble like orchestra rehearsal. And then this is the one that is actually used in the large 1,000-seat concert hall. So this is what they actually play on for orchestra concerts. And they're all different. Part of the challenge of working with an instrument that, at least in an orchestral setting, and typically string quartets as well, will all play seated, is that you don't get to control what chair you're on. In a place like this, people hopefully have at least put some thought into what kind of chair the players are working with and making sure that that's effective. I don't think that happened with this chair, which is unfortunate. But if you're doing something like playing as a traveling musician, or if you're playing at something like a wedding, you're going to sit on whatever chairs they've got, and those are not going to be chairs that have been chosen by musicians. So, what are the challenges that come up with these? Piano benches are great. The downside of this is if you're going to be in this for a very long time, if you're looking at hours of practice or rehearsals, there is no chance to just scoot back and lean back against the back of a chair. Personally, I think that's fine. Remember also that piano players exist, and they also are on these for however many hours a day that they're playing and practicing. So part of the endurance of playing these instruments isn't just in the arms for string players or for winds also with the embouchure, it's also in your back. And how can you still be upright, right? Doing all the things that we work with Alexander Technique, upright with ease, not trying to be a statue, not trying to achieve vertical straight necessarily, but neutral, being able to tilt forward, backward, helps a lot. For cello players, get a wedge cushion. I haven't yet met someone for whom a wedge cushion is a bad idea. Don't give in to the idea that wedge cushions are only for old people. No, they're wonderful. Most of the cello players here use wedge cushions. So if you're not familiar, a wedge cushion is exactly what it sounds like, shaped like a wedge. And so what ends up happening is the back of that cushion is higher than the front. And so you're up and over. This works great for cellos. It keeps you up and over the instrument and encourages lengthening so that as they're playing, they're not able to kind of crouch back, tuck the tail under, away from the instrument. So wedge cushions, big fan. Let's look at these. This chair's great. So this is the large ensemble rehearsal chair, and actually this was also the performance chair when I did my undergrad here back about 15 years ago. And at some point, somebody bought these along the way when I was not here. So there was a large gap in between when I was a student here in undergrad and then coming back later as faculty. This used to be the performance chair, and it was nice. So what this chair lets me do is adjust where I'm sitting without really changing anything about the relationship between my legs and my torso. The reason that's nice is I don't have to worry about exactly where to sit on this when I'm working with different students, according to how tall they are. So I am about 5'6", and when I'm sitting at the back of this, my heels do not touch the ground. So I don't prefer to sit at the back of this chair. When I have students who are over 6 foot, if they're going to sit at the front of the chair, the distance between the knee and the ground is substantially longer than mine, and so they end up kind of crunched in, and a lot of them don't really like that. So I think if you're over about 6 feet tall, it is totally fine to sit at the back of the chair. But notice what part of my back is touching. It's not up here. It's way down here. Where I feel this is at my sacrum, which is the part of the spine that attaches to the pelvis. So I'm feeling this at my sacrum and the sides of my pelvis. What I tell my taller students is to sit way back in these so that when they're playing, pick an instrument. This is a violin approximately. So working with a violin, this is fine for a taller student. There are plenty of violin teachers who would say, no, even in that case, I still want you to sit forward so that you're not limited by the back of the chair. I'm totally on board for that. If that's what, their violin teacher wants, then yeah, we can totally work with that. The way that I would approach this for someone who's taller, who needs to sit forward and be able to play, is working with this lean coming from the hip joints. Notice that as I'm doing this, I'm not changing the relationship between my head, neck, and torso, or my shoulders. This is really important for string players. Shoulders and arms are your whole life, and making sure that those stay as neutral as possible is really key. So as I'm doing these tilts, rotating around my hip joints, I'm making sure that I'm not messing with the angle of my back and my shoulders and my neck, so that if I need to, if we're playing a violin here, I can do this tilt and achieve movement and cueing, right, to be able to cue different movements depending on what's needed, without doing something that is an unhelpful violin thing. That's kind of the underlying principle that we're working with here. In a chair that's pretty level and is not slanted or curved or sloped, that's pretty possible, and it works fairly well. So if you have the option, choose a chair that is as square as possible. Cushioning is great, totally fine. This one has some cushioning. But notice that here, this seat is pretty level, and there's no slope in the middle of it. There is some cushion, which is, again, totally fine, have some comfort, but as square as you can get is going to be the most effective for long-term practice and performance. Which brings us to this thing. At some point, somebody bought this and thought it was a good idea. This is the worst chair in the building. Immediately, it slants me backwards. If I'm gonna sit on this, I have to sit right there. There's about a 1-inch space where this works. And this is where I have to sit with no options. Why? This chair, it's a little hard to see because it's different on the side edges than in the middle of the seat. So here's the height of the front, and here's the height of where clearly they intend a butt to be. It's more than an inch difference. That's a pretty substantial slope. And it only occurs in the middle. It's got this weird tuck up right at the end, so that even if you do want to try to sit right at the back of it, it feels weird and it doesn't quite work very well. And because of this slope, it is really hard to let my legs go. So for my taller players, when they want to be able to sit back, or if they're going to be in rehearsals for a really long time and they're on a chair like this is a challenge. To still maintain an upright, easy neutral, no matter what is going on here, is difficult. There is a round bar underneath the front of this, built into the seat itself. And unfortunately, the bottom of my sit bones, the bottom of my pelvis, is also round. So in order to sit on the front of this chair without starting to fall backwards, I need to achieve this. A curved thing on top of a curved thing, which is why I said there's only like a 1-inch space where that works. It's a really tight area. If I go too far forward, I immediately start to slide off. If I'm an inch backwards, there's nothing supporting the back end of my pelvis and my foundation here. And really consistently, almost all of my students will start to lose their uprightness in this chair. Unfortunately, what I see a lot from things like wedding venues where they frequently will have to bring in, a string quartet to play for the wedding, or, a classical guitarist or something, they have folding chairs. There are not many good folding chairs. They almost all have that slant where the hip joints are going to be lower than the knees. And that's harder to play on. So it's up and over, no matter what, instrument set you're working with here. And that's the challenge. So things that you can do, for example, as a string player, I once saw a professional orchestra get brought in here to work with one of the operas that they just didn't have enough players in the student orchestra to do. And I got there a little bit early, and the concertmaster, the first chair violin, came out with his instrument all ready to play. He sat down in this type of chair that was set up for the orchestra on stage, and he sat differently. He tried a couple different things. He moved around. He turned and talked to his second violin, and what's going on here? And then he got up, took the chair, and left. And then he came back later with a different chair. I don't know where he got it. So you can always ask if you can swap out a chair. You absolutely are allowed. Your gear is important. And as a string player, the chair that you're on is part of your instrument gear. And if that doesn't work for you, find a stage manager and ask, hey, is there anything else? Can I sit on a piano bench? Is there a different chair that's in one of the rehearsal spaces or something that I can go grab? Happy to go grab it myself, right? Stage managers are busy, but you can absolutely ask. Here, all of the cello players know that they are allowed to go and swap out the chairs from the rehearsal space, so they get these, and these are the ones that they sit on for orchestra concerts. So that's allowed. So remember that you can always make adjustments. You are always also allowed to bring some sort of equipment change gear, such as a wedge cushion. Wedge cushions are also a great way to deal with something that is slanted backwards, because that puts you up a little bit more and gives you that support under your foundation. That's going to work a lot better. So our next few videos are going to dig into different string instruments and things that come up with them. I wanted to really make sure to dive into this first because this is universal across all of them, and I don't want to have to re-explain that for every single video. So keep an eye out for those, and remember that you are always allowed to make adjustments to your equipment based on what you need.